Hi guys, my name is Abby and welcome to a new video. So since it is currently now winter, it is February, and my wardrobe is almost entirely summer clothes. I have been very cold and I thought it'd only be fitting for me to make a coat. Uh, I, I have looked at coats online and in stores and just none of them really suit me, if that makes sense. There's not really one that I'd like. So I decided that I'd be making my own. Um, I drew up a little rough sketch, very rough. But yeah, so I'm thinking to have like a cute little Peter Pan color, buttons, pockets, and have it long enough to since I usually only wear skirts and dresses, I would like it to be long enough to kind of cover that, to also just give you more coverage, especially because of the wind. Wind and dresses are not a good mix. Um, so then I went to Hobby Lobby and I found this really cute material. It kind of reminds me of like the teddy bear jacket. You know, they're like brown, but this one's pink. Even though it doesn't really look that pink, it's already shedding, but it's so soft. And I also have a lining fabric. I think I'm going to make it out of flannel, and so I'm just really excited, and hopefully it'll keep me nice and warm. I am going to be making this from scratch, and I've only made one coat before, which is that white one right there, and that was with a pattern, but I think I can do it. I have confidence in myself, which I think is step one and the most important step, so hopefully this all goes well. To start off, I decided to use my lining fabric as my mock-up to knock out two birds with just one stone. I used my basic knowledge of how jackets and coats are constructed and made two front pieces and one back piece, which was cut on the seam so it would open up to make one full piece. I made my measurements much larger than what they usually are because I wanted an oversized look, but I was careful not to make it so oversized that it looked like I was drowning in it. After cutting out my pieces, I connected the front piece to the back piece along the sides and along the shoulders, making sure to leave an opening for the sleeves. Once that was all sewn together, I worked on my least favorite part, which was, as we know, the sleeves. Once again, I cut them much bigger than I needed to because it's easier to cut away and to make it smaller than it is to increase them and add more fabric. I folded the sleeves in half and then straight stitched them down the side to create a tube shape. I like to think that the more I work on sleeves, the better at them I get, but I still am not confident enough in myself to make like a tailored sleeve, so thank God balloon sleeves are so in fashion right now that it covers up any mistakes that I make. After the sleeves were sewn together, I connected them to the base of the coat, making sure that the right sides were together, and then just straight stitched it down to then complete the lining of the coat. After seeing how nicely the lining came out, I was so excited and knew that I would be able to finish the rest of this coat and jumped right into making the real deal. Finally pulling off this pink fabric that I had been hoarding for months, I used my lining as a guide and traced and cut out the pieces onto the pink fluffy fabric, making sure I also had the two front pieces, the one back piece, and the two sleeves. The fluffy fabric shed a lot more than I expected it to and left quite a mess in my room, to the point where I was still finding like fluffs of it days later, even after vacuuming it all up. And even still today, like a month after I made this coat, every now and then I still find a piece of that stupid fluff like stuck to my pants or something. Now, taking this fluffy fabric, I did the exact same thing that I did for the lining, just sewed the shoulder seam and the side seams, and then sewed the sleeve in half and just connected them. But sewing such a fluffy and thick material was also a bit challenging, and it took a lot of patience, a lot of patience, and I just had to make sure that I go slow and steady. Next, I moved on to the collar. For the front and back of the collar, I only used the fluffy fabric and none of the lining fabric because I knew that both sides of the collar would be visible and I only wanted this fabric to be showing. Laying out the coat, I measured how long the collar should be and cut out two identical pieces, and then connected each of those pieces to each of my coats, sewn one onto the lining and sewed the other one onto the pink fluffy coat. I just looked at my sketch again, and I didn't even realize that I wanted a Peter Pan collar, because that is not what I made, but it's fine because the coat turned out beautifully in the end, no matter what collar I gave it. After dealing with that mess of the collars, I connected the collar pieces together of the two coats, making sure to only sew the top and the sides of the collar together, and to therefore now make the coat one piece. After stuffing the lining of the sleeves inside the coat, I folded over the fluffy fabric on the side like over the lining and stitched down to not only create a guide for my buttons, to also add some like special decorative detail on the coat so it wasn't just like flat plane of this fabric. Once I was done sewing the sides, I moved on to the pockets. I wanted to make sure my pockets were sewn after I did the sides so I knew exactly how far over to place my pocket. I first cut out like a square rectangle shape and then folded down the top edge to sew it so that way it would have a nice clean edge when I did sew it down. Then I placed it onto the coat and folded in the other 3 sides in as kind of like to hem it in a way, but since this fabric doesn't really fray, there was no need to really hem it, so just that simple one fold was good enough for me. And this also helps to give it a nice clean look, which is what I want for this coat. Once I was done folding it, I sewed it down and then I made sure to measure out where it was on both sides so the pockets were in the same place on both sides of the jacket to make sure it just makes it look nice. Once the pockets were complete, I did the same thing that I did for the side of the coat for the bottom of the coat, which was folding the fluffy fabric up and over the lining to stitch it down to hide the raw edge of the lining. Now coming back for the sleeves, I once again did the same exact thing, which was folding the fluffy fabric over the lining and stitching it down. If you don't want the stitching to sew, you could always just hand sew the fluffy fabric to the lining, and that way the stitching wouldn't be visible. But like I said, I feel like the stitching added some kind of level of dimension to my jacket, which I really liked. Now with this awesome coat almost complete, it was time for the buttons. I'm not good with buttons because I cannot make buttonholes for the life of me. It's another weakness of mine. But with this fabric, I didn't need to really stitch the buttonholes, which is what I'm bad at, because it doesn't fray like a cotton or satin. It took, I would like to say a few, but it took quite a bit of recording attempts to figure out where to place my body so that you would see me sewing it on my back, because as you can see, I, for some reason, could not figure it out for the life of me where I should be. Every time I was like, yes, this is perfect, this is where I should be, I would finish and look at the recording, and this is what I got. After sewing on the buttons, I measured out where the corresponding buttonhole would be and snipped it out, making sure to cut through all layers of the coat. It's important not to cut too much of a slit for the buttonhole, otherwise the button will just fall out and not hold its place. And after sewing all the buttons and buttonholes, the coat was complete. And for making this completely from scratch, I am so proud and beyond in love with it.